Hi, Deborah.
Hi, Nizam. It's so good to be here with you today.
Yes, and thank you for this opportunity to interview you. It's pleasure to have you in this series of interviews. And friends, here is Deborah Miller, and let me introduce you and tell more about her. Friends, Deborah Miller has a PhD in cell and molecular biology and is a trainer and expert in EFT tapping. She is also a Reiki master, life transform coach, and internationally renowned author. Deborah has been working with children suffering from cancer, helping them and their caregivers alleviate the fear, anxiety, and stress arising from serious illness, and to be better understood the need to cleanse and nourish the physical body as an integral part of the healing process. She also helps people recover from the trauma of natural disasters. Having lived through three major local earthquakes herself, she now helps those around her navigate through and triumph over the inevitable emotional and physical aftermaths of sudden traumatic events. Deborah's scientific knowledge, occupied with her continuing studies of quantum physics and universal truths, enable her to better understand the physiological functions of the different tissues, organs, and systems in the body. So we can ask more and dive deep into what exactly happens when we tap and the corresponding emotional states. It's an
Yes.
integral part of our client support, helping them discover and release the underlying causes of emotional and physical traumas. And about her work and other things, I'm going. Let's listen from her directly. And Deborah, books are available in English and Spanish. So we'll listen about Deborah more from her own words. So, Deborah, how did you get into EFT?
Ooh, it's really a long, convoluted story, actually, but I'll give you the brief version.
Yeah, please.
So, I'm originally from the United States. I grew up on a farm in North Dakota, and my parents actually started a health food store when I was a teenager. And so it got me interested in these sorts of things. And then I decided I needed to study science to understand more about the body before I did more of these other techniques, right? And then it just kind of kept going on. So I studied biology, I studied education, did research in a lab for a while. Then I did my PhD in cell and molecular biology. Then I did more research. And then finally, it's like science kicked me out, right? And, and was taking a break and traveling around in Mexico, right? Where actually I am at this moment, and not sure what I was doing. So I was teaching English. Here I have a doctorate in cell and molecular biology. I was like, well, this is crazy. But I had an opportunity to teach cell and molecular biology in Spanish. So talk about having a tired head. I just throbbed day and night because it was just so intense, reading, writing, speaking, and listening in another language. But that set the stage for me to later, when I came across EFT, I was fascinated, and I came across it on an online course and then just started studying it and using it right away. But later I got invited to a fundraiser for children with cancer. It was in a local park. There was like 5 kids underneath a little tarp, etc. And I asked if I could bring my tappy bear and do some
Yes.
tapping with the children.
Wow.
And so I did. And it was this amazing experience. I had no idea what it was going to be like. They introduced me to the oncologist, the head oncologist at the time. And out of my mouth comes, oh, well, what would it be like if we did something like this in the hospital? And the oncologist says, well, yeah, we need more than just the physical. We know they need emotional support as well. And a couple of months later, I'm in the hospital, well, first I go home and go, why did I say that? Because I had no concept that that's what was going to be part of my life, my mission, project, etc. Got in the hospital. First girl I see is the first girl I tapped with at the park. And she told me that she went home, taught her dad how to do a little tapping with her, and they did
Wow.
tapping together. And it just touched my heart. And then I started working with the children, and finally they capture your heart and soul, these children that are ill, and to be able to support them. I won't say it wasn't it wasn't difficult. It was difficult, and I learned so much. And I came to believe that these children are master souls who are one. They're my master teachers, because I learned to be a much better EFTer by working with these children and their parents and the nurses and as many of the medical staff that I could. And so that's part of what got me into doing EFT with the children with cancer. But overall, I just love working with anything, that
Okay.
comes up, traumas. And now it's for earthquakes, because we had one just a couple of weeks ago. And so you just kind of like, okay, what do we need to do to get in balance, to get into the energy of love, right? Because I want everybody to feel unconditional love. I want to feel it myself, and I want everybody to feel it. But to do that, we have to release the traumas we have and the beliefs and false beliefs about us that hinder us. And so that's part of my bigger mission in life, is work on. And so I continue studying so that I have tools that are easy, they're practical, they're fast, and truly, truly help us. So that's a little bit of kind of my history.
So, Deborah, I'm curious to know more about your books.
Sure.
Let's get started one by one.
Okay.
Yes, so here comes, like, of course, John D. Whitis also has, in one of the interviews I had with her, she briefed
Yes.
about it. Could you please tell more about Emotional First Aid for Children book and
Sure.
the upcoming course?
Yes. Well, John D and I um, are like souls in that we want to help children, right? And we realize that to help children, and I learned this a lot in the hospital, because parents always want to first treat their children. And I found it over and over again that when I did tapping with the parents in the hospital and they calmed, the child instantly calmed. So they're right. So that's part of this process. It becomes very circular, because if the child calms, the parent calms, right? And so when you calm the parent first and get them in this state that they can consciously support their child, and particularly in traumatic situations. So right now we're at the time still of COVID-19, but it could be any trauma. It could be bullying. It could be some other traumas in school. It could be a grandparent passing away, and whatever affects a child, right? So if the parent is trying to get the child to be calm, but they're agitated or they're fearful or they're angry, it usually doesn't work very well, right? And so part of the book, in the first part, because there's 3 parts, the first part is really taking care of yourself and learning that if you take care of yourself and you calm yourself and you have tools and you know what to expect and you know what to look for, it helps you be very present with your children,
Mm.
and then teach your children these simple tools and techniques. Some are tapping, some aren't. Some are different breathing techniques, etc. So we wanted to make it really, really simple. So the first part is basically that. How do you tap for yourself? How do you breathe for yourself? How do you get in your heart? How do you feel okay? How do you get centered no matter basically what's going on around you? Because the world's
Wow.
always going to have some kind of chaos in it. That's
Yes.
just the way the world is, right? And then the second part of the book, we go into looking at languaging, verbal and physical, so it's like, are you standing over the child? Are you down at their level looking at them? Are you touching? Are you, hugging your child? Or, what verbiage are you going to use? Are you going to use something really complicated? Like if you need to run out of your house because there's a fire or something, you don't want a long convoluted sentence. It's like, come now and go, right? And so just really practical things to help people recognize it. And then we looked at all the stages of trauma, upcoming to an event, during the event, what happens after, and then even things you can do long term. Actually, the long-term things will be in the course. But, and then the third part is then we always have this desire to teach others, because once we learn something, we want to
Yes.
teach others, right? So it's like I mentioned the little girl, Cynthia, the first girl that I tapped with in the park. Well, she instantly at 8 wanted to teach her dad and taught her dad very basic tapping, and then they did something together, right? And I've seen this over and over and over again with children. So they want to teach. They want to share what makes them feel good. So let's help parents, which have an inner child who has still probably
Yes.
memories about their traumas, to release that first, because then they can be very, very present and very loving and very helpful and amazing teachers to their children.
Wow. And Deborah, after Jaundice interview, whoever, especially from educational background, I encounter, I tell them about this book. I know you've got to read this book. Really, that's amazing because I know you guys have kept target of reaching 10 million lives through this book.
Yeah.
1 million. I'm sorry about that
Well,
numbers.
I'm looking for, I want to affect 1 million people
Oh,
in
1
my
million.
life.
1 million.
That's me,
Yeah,
and whether it's adults or children, like let's bring
everyone.
in that loving, healing energy so that we can really form this connected,
Yes,
cooperative, loving community that we really are.
really. And such a great initiative. Can you please tell about helping kids with cancer tele-seminar series?
Yeah. Well, after I got to the hospital and started working with the hospital, or with the children in the hospital, you start learning a lot of different things. And people in a stressful situation, like in the hospital, I would come in and go, "Oh, did you remember to do your tapping?" "Oh, no, I forgot." "Oh, you're better at the words than I am," right? So we have all the reasons that we don't do these techniques that we know make us feel good. And so there's like, well, you should write a book. So I ended up writing a book about the experience I had with the children. And it kind of starts out where I give some history about how I got there. I talk a little bit about tapping, how it works, how it functions. And then I provide like a tapping guide for parents just for dealing with their stress. Then the rest of the book is basically 10 stories, real life stories of tapping that I did with children, as close to exactly as what we did as possible. And then in those stories, I explain how to modify what we used in these stories to suit your particular needs. And
Wow,
so then you can tap along as, borrowing benefits. You're just
that's
tapping along
amazing.
and just you're tapping, you're relaxing. But so one example is Hilda was always afraid. She was always just afraid. She was afraid of everything. Nothing was wrong, but she would be afraid. And so we use the image of blowing up a balloon. There's no balloon. We're just using the image. So I had her pick the color. Maybe it had a design. Maybe it didn't have a design. And in her case, because it was fear, we were tapping, and she was imagining blowing the fear into the balloon, tying off the balloon. And sometimes the kids will pop it. Sometimes they just have it float away. It doesn't matter. So there's more fear, then we get out another balloon. And so then they know that there's an infinite way to release the fears they have. So if you got a child that has anger instead of fear, you can still use the image of the balloons and things like that. So I explain those sorts of things in the book. And you get a real feel for these children, and it feels like the book is a way for me to honor them for what I learned from them and with
From them,
them.
with them.
Right. And and the children that I still know, I just contacted one, I guess it's about 3 weeks ago now, and he's 15 and a half now. He got cleared this year of cancer, and he just sent me this beautiful thanks, like, thank you for continuing to encourage me, because he would get discouraged, right? And discouragement, what happens? It lowers our immune system, right? It's getting into sadness. That's not maximum. You want to be in that expanded loving energy. So that book is really about that, to give a guide, a way for people to work with a really difficult topic. Because if you're in it, either the one with cancer, and people who are adults use the same book, even though it was written based on the experience I did with children, because the same topics come up, you know, exactly the same topics come up. And then, you know, just doing things in more ways that people can have access, right? So the book is in print in English, Spanish, and French, and then in on the Kindle version, it's in English and Spanish. Because let's just make it accessible. Let's make it easy for people to use an amazing tool to help children feel better, and then as an adult to feel better. Because you don't want to put your fear and your panic on top of the situation for your child to feel. Yeah.
That's an amazing initiative. And Deborah, always I have seen in movies like, you know, in even in the Game of Thrones or Lord of Rings series, like these dragons are always with flames of they're harmful. But where did this happy
Yeah.
for kids, the dragon with
Okay.
flames of love has come?
I'll show you the cover. Okay. So here's a dragon with
Okay.
flames, right? But it's very different than a dragon who is very violent and destructive.
Yeah, destroy. I have seen only
Okay.
that version, so I want to know about
Yeah,
this loving dragon.
exactly. So it was really an interesting thing that happened. This teen went in for his last exam after 2 years of treatment for leukemia, thinking he was done, and he had a relapse. So now he's got a fever. He's depressed. He's like, I just can't do this for another 2 years. I can't do chemo and these treatments for another. It's just like, you know, went into total despair. And we got along really well, and we liked to talk about things, and he liked when I would explain how things were working. And then he, because of his age, because he was a teenager, he would explain to me what he was feeling in his body as we were doing the tapping, okay? Or after, right? One or the other. And so he had this fever, and we're tapping, and all of a sudden I asked him, I said, well, if you had a power animal, what would that animal be? You know, something that makes you feel powerful. Some kids will use superheroes. It doesn't matter, right? And he chose a dragon. And so we're tapping about him having this fever and feeling bad and feeling this despair, etc. And all of a sudden it pops into my head, oh, flames, we usually think of them as destructive. What if they're flames of love? And so I started using that word. So that felt like total guidance, right? And all of a sudden, you know, he goes, I don't feel as hot. Like he felt like his fever was leaving, right? And it was really, really intriguing.
Oh.
And so that's where the title of the book comes from the story of Diego and us tapping about this fever he had with his relapse and his despair. And then, of course, I left, but I guess a couple hours later, they checked and his fever had dropped. So, right? So we can have flames of love. Dragons in mythology actually were very powerful animals. And it represented power for him, and it represented healing for him. And so then we took it and used it as the symbol to burn out the fever with love, right? And he felt it, he perceived it, and he just felt so much better. So that's where the title of the book comes from.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And now, see, you worked with children, and you have come up with different books. Let's talk a bit about adults as well. So you help adults also with various issues, especially who
Yes.
have survived trauma. So how
Yes.
is EFT helpful to deal with traumas?
Okay. There's a lot of different traumas, and
Yes.
I don't
You
know why
you
this is
you
this
you
is what this is
personally
what. Yeah, I'll
have
explain kind of
this.
scientifically as well, but I'll give a couple stories first, and then I'll explain kind of generally the science behind it. So my father was a World War II veteran. Okay, so I don't participate in it, but there's EFT for vets. Okay, so here's my dad, a World War II vet. And he went through the EFT for Vets program. Another EFTer actually did the tapping, and I filled out all the forms and I helped him with all the process of it.
Okay.
But I felt he's my father. You know, so 67 years afterward, you know, he would still have dreams. He could still see the napalm. He could still hear the sounds of what happened in World War II. Right? 67 years. We're not talking about, oh, well, you know, I fell down and hurt myself. We're talking about a war trauma. And it was amazing. In the 6 sessions he did, all of a sudden it was like, that's water under the bridge. So it was really intriguing because I learned so much about my father. I learned why he was so angry at the government, because of how he felt mistreated, like he was dispensable because a man was sent to war, man or woman at this point, right? And so it was really intriguing. That's a huge trauma. And so that's one way you can use tapping to help release that kind of trauma. I've worked with people who have been sexually abused or bullied or physically abused, because the memory of the event tends to stay, or specific smells or touches or places.
Yes.
Okay. So just to give an example, one woman came in with panic attacks. We're talking panic attacks. Okay. She went hiking with her daughter in the woods, and she passed this one grassy area, thought she wasn't going to be able to walk. She thought she was going to die right there of a panic attack. As we're working on it, it comes up, we're starting to find what's underneath. And it was a memory. That type of grass was the type of grass that was there when her mother was attacked, when she was a child. Okay. You clear that trauma underneath, then the panic attacks left, right? Totally different situation, completely safe where she was, but an image of this type of grass triggered her to a memory of her childhood. So we can use tapping for all those sorts of things, sexual abuse as well. I'm working with a teen who was bullied in school. And so we're looking at those sorts of things and how that creates life patterns of not speaking up in her case, right? Being shy, not being confident, doesn't feel like she can speak up about herself, right? Or her opinions because they'll be disregarded, etc. It's just not safe. So these are, you can have big traumas or you can have little traumas, right? And many times, you know, parents always try to be the perfect parent. But let's say you are the perfect parent, but your child perceives something not perfect about you, and that child carries that trauma in their life, right? Their
doesn't
perception
matter
about
what the
themselves.
age is, it still impacts.
Yes. And I've been working with other people about their traumas, and there's some physical things, and one is around a mother's death. And so there's still things coming up, but it's having a physical effect on our body now. And so as we're communicating with the part of her that remembered the trauma of the loss of her mother, right? And not being heard, not being supported, and not even accepting support. So we're unraveling that old trauma so that the physical symptoms that the body is giving just to help you find what needs to be healed in a past part of your life, right?
Yes.
So I find it really, really intriguing. Okay, so how does tapping work? Now, there's still some mystery, you know, because this miraculous body we live in is amazing, and we don't understand everything about it. But what we know about tapping, and there's more research articles out there and more research studies that have been done. And so the amygdala there's 2 little organs. They're about the size of an almond in our head. And they basically, for me, it's the alert system, you know, warning, 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 okay? Very good in the past when there were dangers that you really either had to fight, flight, go into fight, flight, or freeze to survive, right? The animals use this system all the time, right? Well, that's part of our older part of our brain, so it's still active, but it's very good. So if you step out in the street and a car's coming, that system clicks and you jump out of the way instead of getting hit by the car. Good thing to have, right? The problem is now if your internet's not working, you can't go to your favorite coffee shop, you know, you don't have the same freedoms, et cetera, et cetera. Or, you know, your internet just drops for half an hour and you're like, panic, right? You know, we're so into our devices.
Yes.
That same alarm system turns on. So that alarm system sends a message to your brain to turn on the fight and flight hormones, which are adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. So cortisol is the inflammation hormone. And we know inflammation isn't good for your body long-term to stay healthy, right?
Yes.
And adrenaline is like drinking 10 cups of coffee and you're like this.
You'll
And
feel
then,
better.
yeah, you feel better momentarily, but then
Yes.
it's really stressful on your body. And it has an effect that when that system is turned on all the time, your regenerative and your relaxation hormonal system it's not turned on. You're in this system or this system. And so when you're doing tapping, you're sending basically a message to the amygdala that sends a message to the brain to lower the stress hormones in your body and turn on the relaxation regeneration hormones. Serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, right? They rejuvenate your body. That's what, when we sleep, those hormones are also turned on to regenerate, to renew, to create repair in your body. So doing tapping, crazy as it looks, you know, but
Yes.
at this
Weird,
point,
weird.
here I am, you know, it doesn't bother me because I know that underneath what's happening is I'm reducing the stress hormones in my body, okay? And having my regenerative hormones turned on, which means I'm improving my immune system. So my body can do what it normally does. The cells in the body do everything to stay alive and heal themselves. Right? In a way, that's why it's so hard to die, because they are made to keep going. And they will do anything to keep you going. So give them a hand, literally. Give them a hand.
Helping hand.
Yeah, literally, a helping fingers and hands, and they're with you all the time. So your tools are always with you. And so you can make these huge changes. And also while you're doing that, when you're doing the tapping, you're also tapping into those old stories and those old beliefs in your subconscious. So sometimes they come up as tears. Sometimes they release as yawns. Sometimes they just come up like, oh, this memory popped into my head. Where did that come from? Because as we're tapping and releasing whatever topic we've chosen at the moment, it may tie into the network of memories we have, bring up what you really need to heal, and then you can address the underlying issue. Right? So now you're healing physiologically because you're helping your immune system, and you're healing emotionally because you're rewriting the automatic programs in your subconscious. Okay? So I look at it this way. We have thoughts that we repeat daily.
Yes.
Right? We have feelings that we repeat daily or almost daily. And then it becomes an automatic pattern, and now we have biochemistry. Right? So if you learn to drive a car, you're all attentive, and then all of a sudden you're driving and you don't even pay attention. Well, the subconscious, the automatic program is driving. Okay? So that's good when you're driving. It's good that you don't have to learn to walk every day. It's good that you don't have to learn how to put your clothes on every day, use silverware, you know, be positive, be happy. Those programs are really good to have running automatically. But the ones where you're not worthy, where you're not lovable, you know, not capable, or you're worried or you're stressed, those programs kick in automatically. And you know they're an automatic program because they just pop in. You don't choose to do them. They just appear, right? Yeah, they're just running. And so you got, you know, and you're like, well, why can't I stop it? That's one of the big questions. Why is this so hard to quit smoking, stop eating chocolate cake, or whatever it is you want to stop, right? Biting your nails, you know, because it became automatic. It was a good thing for one moment, and then the pattern didn't really serve you anymore, but it's still running. And now your body automatically knows how to do it, right? That's your automatic nervous system. Autopilot. There you are.
And why is my life same?
Yeah, why is my life always the same? Why doesn't it change? And it makes people really frustrated. And this is why I tell people, you need to really be persistent. And people
Yes.
don't want to, they want the magic pill, the red pill from the
Red
Matrix.
pill.
Everything changes immediately. But the reality is, for us, lots of things can change very rapidly. But by continuing to doing tapping, breathing exercises, any techniques that you want to use, yoga, meditation, there's lots of things, prayer, there's a lot of things you can do, that what it is it's short-circuiting that old pattern. And every time you short-circuit it and choose and move into a new pattern, which with tapping you can also install new patterns and new beliefs and new ways to think things, then what happens? You've changed your neural net. You're breaking the network that holds you in the pattern.
Okay.
Those neurons actually disassociate and the new ones come in form, but it takes, at this point, about 72 hours for a new thought pattern to stay, for those neurons that run it to stay attached. And then as you keep repeating them, of course, now they're going to make a thicker web, a thicker network that runs that pattern automatically. So it's just amazing. I just find it so amazing. Like, wow.
So, Deborah, there is something called a green drink and a red
Yes.
drink, and they both meet and turn into a book. What is this all about?
Okay, the green drink, red drink book also started because of the work I did in the hospital.
Mhm.
Okay, there's a lot of alternatives and complementary things that people can do, but I was going into a hospital situation. It didn't feel like it was my right to really tell them all sorts of other things they could do that would take them out of the choice they made. Their choice was their choice. That's fine. So tapping is complementary.
Mhm.
And also improving your diet is complementary, right? And then whatever healing technique beyond that you choose, okay?
Yes.
So children are famous for not wanting to eat their vegetables, right? So I started out with my own journey of doing more green drinks and, and I grew up with loving desserts. My mother made fabulous desserts. So I started with the sweeter ones. So those are kind of the red drinks where I would use, different fruit and things that would make them taste sweeter. And then you start reducing that and going more into the greener drinks and the greener drinks. But I would give talks and we would make some green drinks. And so, there's a lot of papaya here, or there's pineapple here, or there's melon here. And so we would start with something simple like papaya or melon and add a little bit of spinach or a little bit of lettuce,
Wow.
right? And then you just blend it. So you're drinking a melon or papaya juice, but you're starting to have the fiber and you're starting to have the vegetables in it. And then you keep moving it more into other types. And so it was providing them with options to how to help their children have a better diet. Plus, when you are ill, having something liquid to eat requires much less energy than digesting food. Digesting food takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Chewing, the stomach, the intestines. So when it's already blended, it just makes it easier,
Yeah.
right?
So it
And so
makes
you're
life
now
also easier.
reserving your energy for healing versus the digestion portion, right? And so those are the kinds of the reasons that book came together, and published it. Like, here, utilize these tools, take advantage of them, right?
So, Deborah, in different countries, uh, different fruits are available, different
Yeah,
vegetables are available. So, is this book, um, beneficial for people from different countries?
sure.
Okay.
And part of it is I give different examples and things like that. And basically the book is to give you some ideas, a little bit about blending versus,
Ginseng.
juicing, giving you some other ideas about, here are different sorts of things. Explore,
Yes.
expand, right? So it's, oh, look at this. It's like, oh, Yeah, well, pineapple may not be the easiest thing to find in Canada, but
Yeah.
pineapple's here where I live, and I have fresh cilantro, and I'll mix the two, and I make a drink out of it. It's great. But if
Okay.
I'm somewhere north, I might be using cranberries because that's the fruit that you can find there, or apples or other berries that are there. And there's blueberries aren't common here. So
Yes.
then you start playing around with the recipes to create things that you like. And yes, I've had some drinks that I made that didn't. I was like, no, that one doesn't work. But all of a sudden, I put some other things together. I was like, wow, this is incredible. I would never have thought to put that together. So I want people to explore, and use the kitchen and the things that we have as a real supplement to our health, and have curiosity about food. Teach children to have curiosity
Yes.
about being in the kitchen and how helpful that is to this physical body. Still needs physical food. So
Yes.
let's provide it with the healthiest we can.
Okay. So, Deborah, I was going through your website and my attention caught on something.
Okay.
Techniques that you use. So let's move a little beyond EFT now,
Okay.
little beyond physical realm, and talk about Akashic records.
Ah, the Akashic records. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, what is it all about? How did
Well,
you incorporate into your work, and did that help to work with the
yeah.
clients?
Yeah. I think of the Akashic records as probably a little bit more metaphysical, right?
Mhm,
And I use it when it comes up and when it feels needed. And I think of the Akashic records basically as your soul's history, right? Your soul has a history.
mhm,
And sometimes you go to a place and you feel the positivity or the negativity of the place. I don't know, this is popping into my head, where a place I haven't been, but everyone who's been to Auschwitz,
mhm.
after the Holocaust, they still feel the energy of what's happened there. So land, buildings, and us have history, right? And so I use that on occasion when somebody is trying to move forward and they just feel stuck. So it's like something in their history is stuck. And
Mhm.
so then we just kind of look to see. I have this technique that I use is different. Some use the Akashic records where it's a meditation. The technique that I use has charts, and so we go through the charts. So we're connecting together and seeing what the soul is saying. This is blocking me. Let me release it. Right?
Wow.
And so it can be very helpful.
Yeah, can you
Very
please
helpful.
share any of the case study with related to Akashic records? Because I'm curious
Because you're
to.
curious.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of in relationship to different healing processes. Um, I'll give you kind of an offshoot.
Okay.
Sometimes what happens is, particularly with people who are very empathic, very sensitive,
Yes.
right? You go out in a crowd,
Hmm.
right? And now you're already feeling all that energy, right? And so sometimes you come home and it still feels like you're carrying all of that energy. And so sometimes it's listed more like extra souls. And so it's like they're in your energy field because we are energy first before we're
Yes.
particle, right?
Yeah.
That's quantum physics. And so sometimes we'll just clear out just basically asking these souls, okay, go back,
Yeah.
we're done. And then release them from being kind of stuck in your energy field. And people calm down. So a lot of times that nervousness drops off. Sometimes there's master programs will come up. So maybe you have a pattern that you repeat a lot. Maybe you're a victim, or maybe you're from an alcoholic family, or maybe or maybe you just have a lot of anger or resentments. And so if that's a master program, then we'll look at what that master program is. What is a pattern that you keep repeating, and you check on it. And then you release it from the record, and then you can use tapping and conscious techniques to release it in your daily life. So that's pretty much how I use it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deborah, for
You're welcome.
explaining about your work, about these books. And friends, I highly recommend to read these books. You can find all these books listed in deborahmiller.com and
Mm. It's actually deborahmiller.org.
.org.
Org.
Sorry,
Yeah,
dot
that's all
.org.
right.
Like,
That's all right.
the easiest thing is like go to Google and just type Deborah Miller EFT.
Exactly.
Lazy way of finding Deborah Miller even more. And that's amazing,
Yeah.
like how you bring your educational qualification, and then how you have worked with the clients, then also with kids, then you came up with this project. Awesome. Like you are doing amazing work, Deborah. It's
Thank
been
you.
pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much once again for this opportunity, for having talking to you and sharing your experiences. Especially, I love the dragon of love. Dragons are not always dangerous.
No, they're
And
not
then,
always
yeah,
dangerous. But isn't it always perspective,
yeah,
right? You
true,
can
true.
perceive something as dangerous or not.
Yes,
And that can shift the whole way we live our life. And so we can look, for example, right now is a dangerous time. I think it's the most amazing opportunity to heal anything that I still
yes,
have left over that I need to heal, and to connect, and really choosing love and focusing on, okay, this is happening now. Now I have a past. What is the future I want to create from here onward? And like connecting with you and connecting with the people who follow you, and helping more people really feel love for everyone and
yes,
everything, right? Whether it's a plant, whether it's an animal, and just having this beautiful respect and love for ourselves first, and then for
so
everyone else.
true.
Because if I truly love myself, then I'm gonna ripple love out into the world, and that's probably one of my biggest goals, right?
Thank you very much. And Deborah, I feel that every parent should have these books so that they are able to help themselves and their children as
Yes.
well.
And this
That's
is why we wrote them, because
yes,
people are looking for simple, practical. It doesn't have to be difficult.
yes.
And a parent asked me the other day, well, what do I do when I have these crazy teenagers in my house? I said, well, you get to start with learning to be centered and loving, and in that core loving energy that you have, because the world, like I said before, has always got something chaotic, whether it's teenagers, whether it's traffic, whether it's a virus, whether it's anything else. So the goal is then be centered, learn how to do that for yourself, because then you can do it with everyone else around you. And it's a beautiful journey, beautiful, beautiful journey.
And your vision to help people around is amazing. And I wish more books come from you and it spread across. Thank you very much, Deborah.
You're welcome.
It was wonderful meeting you. Thank you.
Likewise.